Hey guys, my name is Brian Reynolds with Sage Music, and today I'm going to show you how to set up your drum set like a pro. With this setup in the video, I'll show you how to play with ease, feel totally comfortable, and be able to achieve your goals. A poor setup can lead to muscle strain, back pain, and it can also cause unnecessary challenges for you in your playing as you grow as a musician. With this setup, you'll be in the best position to be the best drummer you can be. To start, before anything else, we need a carpeted surface, and we'll talk about that in a second. Once the carpet's down, the first piece will be the bass drum. The bass drum, or kick drum, is the largest drum in the drum set. It has two sides, the resonant side and the batter side. The batter side is the one that you hit. The resonant side is the one that you don't. You can usually tell the difference because the resonant side has some sort of artwork or a label on it. But if you're setting up your drum set for the first time and the heads aren't on it, you can always tell because the spurs right here are towards the front, that is towards the resonant head. Once we have our bass drum head down, we need to release those spurs because they will hold the weight of the drum. We need the carpet so that the pointed ends can catch and hold the drum in place. One on each side, same thing. And tighten. When adjusting your spurs, you want just a little bit of space beneath the hoop of the drum. That way the weight is on the spurs and not on the hoop itself. With the bass drum in position, the next step is the bass drum pedal. Bass drum pedal is that with which we hit the bass drum, just like this, and it attaches to the bottom hoop right here. So from behind the bass drum, you want the hoop to come right in between these two clamps. Lift it up, slide it in, and tighten underneath. You want to tighten it nice and snug, but not too much. Most drum hoops are made of wood, and if you tighten them too much, it'll actually start to dent and damage that wood. Some people call it bass drum rash. If you need, adjust the height of the bass drum beater so that you're hitting in the center of the drum, and otherwise, we're all set. Once the bass drum is set up, the next step will be the drum stool, or drum throne. Drum thrones are like any stool, except the most important part is adjusting the height. From the seated position, you want your thighs to have a slight downward angle. Otherwise, position it so that you can reach both pedals, and we'll talk about the hi-hat pedal in a little bit. This particular drum stool has a swivel, so all I need to do to change the height is spin it left for higher, right for lower. Once I've got the right height, I can move on to the next step, which is the snare drum. First, the snare drum stand looks like this. This is the assembled position, tripod base, and what we call the basket. The basket is what holds the snare drum. The snare drum itself, just like the bass drum, has two heads. The batter head, which we hit, and the resonant head, which we don't. Or really, we call this the snare side head. That's because this is where the strainer is, which gives it that snarey sound. So position it, batter side up, inside the basket, and this is going to go right in between your legs. Now when adjusting for the height of the snare drum, it should be about at your waist, and a good test is if you can do both regular strokes and rim shots in which you hit the rim and the snare at the same time without hitting your leg. So right now I think this is actually a little bit too low for me. Perfect. Once the snare drum is in place, we can add the rest of the drums. These are the toms. Drums like the snare, but with no snares underneath. We'll start with the rack tom, and for that, we need a piece like this. These are tom arms. They go in the center of the bass drum. While there are a few different designs, this one's very common. Simply an arm joint with a ball and socket so we can adjust it. We'll take our rack tom. The smaller tom usually goes right up front. Tighten to the arm, and you can adjust the height further. And then, using the ball and socket joint, you can fine-tune exactly how you want that drum to go. Some people may play flat, slanted severely towards themselves. I like somewhere in between. As with everything, tighten it up good, and then we'll be ready to go. A good test for any of this stuff is if it's easily within reach. What does that mean? That means that with my drumstick, from my seated position, I don't need to lean forward or extend my arm all the way to reach it. Okay? Part of having good posture here behind the kit is not just having the legs slanted or sitting up straight. It's by maintaining this position whenever you're playing. So right now, this tom is easily reachable. My elbow's bent. The stick is doing most of the reach. It's all in the same neighborhood. Next, we'll move on to the floor tom. The floor tom is larger, goes here on the floor. Now, unlike most floor toms, this tom also has a ball and socket joint and actually doesn't sit on the floor. Many floor toms will have 3 legs that come out the bottom and you can move it anywhere, but this doesn't really affect much. It's still going in the same place. The floor tom should go to the right of your right foot. Your right foot and right leg is between the snare drum and the floor tom, so it's going to go right here. Same thing, ball and socket. Slide the tom onto the arm. And tighten. Now regarding height, this one can and often will match the snare drum. So using the snare drum height you've already set up, use the floor tom to match. Because this one is not on 3 legs, you must be careful to balance it on the tripod stand. Fits right here. Right next to the snare drum, should all be within easy reach. That's the drums. This is a basic 4-piece kit. If there are other toms, you can fit them in. Some will have a third, like this one has an arm for a third tom, or many more from that, but this is kind of the basic center. Once the drums are set up, we can move on to the cymbals. First, we'll take a look at the hi-hat. The hi-hat stand is the other pedal that we play, this time with our left foot. We put 2 cymbals, the hi-hats themselves, on the stand, and we'll talk about this very important piece of equipment, the HiHat Clutch. Take your cymbals. Modern cymbals will have printed right on them, whether it's the top or bottom, though typically the bottom is a little heavier, in case you can't tell. The bottom simply goes on the stand, stays there, nothing's holding it. The top is held by this HiHat clutch. The HiHat clutch has a few pieces. First, you must take off the bottom screw. Then there are 2 pieces of felt, and the hi-hat goes between these 2 pieces. Bottom screw, back on, and tighten the bottom screw all the way. That way it stays on. The remaining 2 screws, right here, affect how loose or how tight this top cymbal is. What does that affect? Having it very tight will lead to a crisper sound. The cymbal won't move as much, they won't be kind of crashing together. If you loosen it up, there's a little bit more room for movement and gets what sometimes is called a trashier sound. Just like before, I like mine somewhere in the middle, not totally tight, but with restraint. When setting up the height of your hi-hat, you must do this before you tighten it itself, otherwise the arm won't move. I like to use my stick for reference. Really, you just need enough room, so with 2 sticks, you could play traditionally right hand over left hand, and have clearance for both. For reference, you could go about halfway up the drumstick, and you can figure out higher or lower what's comfiest for you. The next cymbal to round out the kit is the ride cymbal. The ride cymbal is much larger, usually played on top with the tip of the stick, but can be used as a crash or the bell. A lot of options here. These are the 2 main cymbals in any drum set. For that, we need a regular cymbal stand, which has a few components of its own. Mainly, this adjustable arm. By loosening this screw, we can adjust the height this way. And with this screw on the other side, we can adjust the torque. It's turning. Finally, up here, there's an additional angle. So you can get this in any position that you need. But I would use the same rule that I offered before, is that it should be easily within reach. If your cymbal is so far that your arm is out like this to be able to play it, it's too far. You'll never be able to play like that for a long time. Right now, I can play on it no problem. The bell I can reach too, but I think it's still a little far for my taste. Sliding it up just a bit. Height-wise, it about matches my toms, the rack tom especially. And I still have clearance to play these drums too. Ride cymbal, even the bell is right there. Toms, snare drum, we're all in one area. I can do it all from the straight seated position. With your drum setup exactly like this, you can still find different variations that make it most comfortable for you. But in order for the most ergonomic movement, for the most comfortable playing, and so you can feel the most confident, this is a great basis for setting up your new drum set. This is just the basic setup for any 4-piece drum set. There can be more cymbals, there can be more toms, there can be less. But this gives you the basic framework so that you can play in the most comfortable way possible. It's the most ergonomic design, so you can be comfortable, maintain good posture, be able to reach everything, play and practice for hours. That way you're in the best position to achieve your goals as a player. Thanks for checking out this video about how to set up your drum set like a pro. Be sure to like and subscribe and check out other videos by Sage Music. Thanks for watching. Once you've taken the time to carefully set up your drum set, the last thing to do is to play.